Is there anything you want to say in regards to the reception of the game? We already talked about it, but I guess more in the vein of like, we're giving you Game of the Year. I know that's not, I'm sure it's flattering, but...
it's extremely flattering. Yeah, I mean, I think we're very grateful and relieved at the general reception, because yeah, it was, I suppose, risky or scary at times when we took certain decisions. But I think, like I said before, the game, we felt the game needed to feel a certain way, and everything needed to kind of support those ideas. And so it meant committing to certain ideas. And we did sort of constantly evaluate how long it was taking to do things and the pacing of things. But we had to commit to those ideas, I think, to give a real sense of place. And, I don't know if we got the balance right everywhere, but we certainly were aware of the decisions we were making and why we were making them. And so for us, yeah, the reception that we've got, we couldn't be happier with. But what the most interesting stuff I think for us to read is where people say, oh, why was this decision made? Why was this decision made? And some, that is what we really like to hear about, and take that and consider it as we move forward to the next thing. I don't think we could have made this game, we would have known how to make it any other way than the way we made it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a robbery. We have all made mistakes over the years, Hosea. Every last one of us. But I kept us together, kept us alive, kept the nooses off our neck.
Listen to me. When the time comes, you gotta run and don't look back. This is over.
Okay, so by now people know that Red Dead Redemption 2 is GameSpot's Game of the Year. Callie, I'm going to start with you because you reviewed it. What, in broad strokes, makes Red Dead Redemption 2 your personal Game of the Year? Because I know you were also arguing for it in 2018.
For me, it's like how every part of the game interacts to develop a story and characters. So from the way the open world unfolds to what you can and can't do within that world to how that world draws you into the character of Arthur Morgan specifically and to the Van der Linde gang as a whole. I think all of those things combine to make something really special. I've said this before, I wouldn't call Red Dead Redemption 2 necessarily like the most fun game to play of the year, and I think we talked about this, but that's not the most important thing to me, and that's not something that I weigh very heavily when I'm thinking about Game of the Year. And I think the things that are like more laborious about it, more methodical about Red Dead are things that make it really stand out for me.
Yeah, it is such a flawed game when you look at it, but like you said, some of those flaws are like noticeably on purpose to make you slow you down in the pacing of the world. Like to make one better bullet, you literally have to do one at a time, cut them with your knife, put it away, do another one, put it away. When you're cooking, you have to do one piece of meat at a time. But like those things within the world and the fact that this world itself is what really hit me. The fact that it's this responsive world. I really like that the game world recognizes when you do things to the point that like the game will remember things you did that not even you do. So you'll go back to like Strawberry later on and this guy will be sitting out front and he'll remember that you had given him money or that you had saved his horse from a thief or something, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't remember that, but he did because that was an event for him and the game cared that I did that. Obviously you start to see the cracks kind of where other people will come into the same like spontaneous event, but the game is so artful in the way it helps you come across those and the way that it remembers your actions that it's hard not to just be impressed constantly. And the fact that it recognizes your actions really plays a part because, Lucy, you can go honorable or dishonorable, and in many same ways that other games do it, like there are different endings, but it also kind of changes how the world treats you. Like you were honorable your first playthrough, right? Like, yeah. Did you notice the world kind of welcoming you a little more?
Yeah, certainly, like walking through all the towns, everyone would be just, tip of the hat to me and just being very polite to me and thanking me for things that I'd done if they were honorable in the past. And I think as well, to your point about how you kind of see the cracks because other people are experiencing the same things, at the same time, not since maybe Breath of the Wild did I have that feeling of being at home playing and then immediately wanting to come into work just to talk to everyone about what I'd experienced that night and what everyone else had been like experiencing at the same time. And it was also, for a single player game, having that feeling of camaraderie with everyone because you're all experiencing this world in your own different way was something really, really special for me.
I'm in a real bind. This feller, he's in a bad way. You gotta help me. I'll pay you.
Okay, calm down. Where is he?
He's inside, upstairs. Come with me, I'll show you. It was me or him. I
The
swear.
hell is this?
I gotta clean this
I'm
room.
still seeing stuff that
Yeah.
I didn't catch on my playthrough. Like people are finding it online and posting it on Reddit and YouTube, and I feel like there's still so much more to that game that even though I've completed the story, there's so much left for me to uncover.
Yeah, I'm trying to play Dishonorable in this save right here on Xbox One, and even just like the little interactions, I notice little differences. The way Arthur talks, the way he talks, the way he speaks, the way characters interact with him, even in cutscenes, it feels like, I mean, I don't know for a fact, but it seems like some even like really minor cutscenes have been rewritten just to reflect the fact that Arthur is dishonorable in this playthrough.
And Jake, you've played pretty much every Rockstar game, and we had talked about this during our arguments that this is probably the least Rockstar game ever made because of its like tone and its story. As someone who has a long history with that developer, how did like the tone of the story and Arthur as a character come across to you after a playthrough and a half?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was my favorite thing personally about Red Dead Redemption 2 is a lot of Rockstar games are pessimistic. They're like black comedies, you could say, like a lot of, they're very cynical. And this game, while it kind of dips into that at the end, which I think makes sense because it leads into the second game.
Especially if you're dishonorable, I guess.
Yeah, I think it feels, I don't want to say uplifting because it's not really, you know, but it's almost heartwarming in a weird way seeing Arthur develop as a character and seeing other characters around you also develop and come to terms, except Micah. Micah sucks from beginning to end.
And also, like, it's, again, like, we won't spoil anything because obviously if you haven't played this game, this is the #1 game we recommend you play. But, Callie, you touched on this, how the game's laborious mechanics, as you put it, they're there to like make the world feel, or the world is forcing you to go slower and to kind of like inhabit it. But also, you find out later on as the game comes on that there are very, very strong reasons tying you to Arthur Morgan that they're using those mechanics. And it's very hard to explain without spoiling it, but I will never ever spoil that for anybody, whether it's like tomorrow or 5 years from now, because of how the game's systems and mechanics feed into the storytelling, and not just the storytelling, like games do that, and games have been doing that for 5 to 10 years. The fact that they feed into the characterization and the way you inhabit that role is really like just downright astounding, especially toward the end of the game.
Yeah, this was the hardest thing about reviewing this game, was that I couldn't articulate this the way I wanted to, and it's still like I'm not going to spoil it, of course, but I do think like this is the thing we were talking about in debates with people who are like, you know, I kind of fell off Red Dead 2. I don't know, you know, it's frustratingly slow or whatever, and I'm like, there is a reason to all of that, and that is, I think, my favorite thing about the game, aside from the journal. I love Arthur's journal a lot. But that's another thing that builds him as a character and as a person, as like someone you're supposed to relate to. And I think those mechanics, like you know, the weight mechanic and having to eat to maintain weight, like that one I kind of didn't appreciate until like I got a little further away from the game. But I think all of those things like help bring you into Arthur's like actual emotional state in a way that not a lot of games can do, but they have the potential to do, and I just really wanted to, when we were talking about what the game of the year would be, to highlight Red Dead for that specifically. Like not just, like I think even calling it an open world game is a little bit disingenuous because it's very linear in the way it unfolds actually. Like I think what it does with characters, its strongest suit, and I'm really still impressed by it. I'm going to be thinking about it for a really long time.
And speaking of, it's funny because from the time we started previewing the game, several months before release, up until now, it becomes increasingly clear as you play the game and inhabit Arthur that it's just as much like a role-playing game as anything else. In the way you play Arthur, obviously. Not just the 2 meters, like the classic Paragon Renegade kind of thing that we're all used to and we have been for a very long time, but like, it's not like it's not a role-playing game in the sense that like Divinity was, or like a lot of these number-crunching stat games are. It's a role-playing game because you are playing that role as Arthur, and just the way you can interact with NPCs, like, and pretty much every single NPC, whether it's throwing a beggar a coin or just telling the shopkeeper to fuck off when you just don't even want to talk to him, you just want to go pick up that can of peaches, or there's more verbs here than just shoot or punch, which I really appreciate. Did you like, were you using those social interactions throughout the game?
Yeah, like, and not only just because I was playing as a good guy and it was easy to build up that, like, there's a gamey way of doing it where you could use it to build up your honor meter, but honestly, I just felt like I was encompassing that character so much that, I mean, I remember telling you guys this story, but like my first night when I was playing, and you go into town, it's one of the very early missions, you go into town with Uncle and everyone, and the game makes you steal a horse just to show you how to do it, and then you ride out of town, and then you can bring the horse back.
Here's your horse back, friend.
Oh, you really were just borrowing it.
Appreciate it.
And all my friends had left me, and I had no way of getting out of town. I could steal another horse if I wanted to, but I was like, I don't want to do that because I want to be this honorable good guy, so I walked all the way back to camp like a chump. But I don't remember ever doing that in a game before, because that game made me feel like I had way more, like it felt like it was going to judge me on more than just a gamey level, like a gamified level.
Yeah, and then that's one of the things that I think enhances the times in the game where you don't really have a choice besides shoot or punch. Like the fact that some of those options are there throughout the game, and then when you don't get to do that, when you don't get to diffuse a situation because the mission won't let you, like I think that makes that more powerful.
Yeah.
And then I also, like, I would walk through town and I would like get a little too close to somebody on my horse and immediately be like, "Good morning, ma'am." Like I felt so bad. Like if I,
So sorry.
I was like, "Oh, that was very rude of me. You're just trying to go back. Good morning." Like I really was doing dumb shit like that. That is, in any other game would be like a waste of time, doesn't achieve anything, but I just was already so drawn in that I couldn't not do that.
And that's where a lot of the frustrations from a lot of people came from. It's like, oh, I just bumped into this person on my horse in Saint Denis on accident, and now the whole town wants me. It's like, you should have been more careful. Like, the game's not throwing you into them. You could have slowed down. Yeah, it's frustrating, but you should have galloped your horse or trotted your horse. I don't ride horses. I don't know what the different speeds are called. But like, you should have cantered.
First gear and second gear.
Yeah, you should have gone into first gear riding down this crowded city street. But we talk about how the characterization ties into the systems and everything, but the world itself and the way that, obviously, the premise itself is talking about the last days of the Outlaws, 1899, the Vanderlyn gang, or the Sons of Dutch, as Dutch says sometimes, like, it is very much about them trying to cling to an old way of life that doesn't exist anymore. And it's funny, the farther east you're pushed in the game and the farther the story goes, the more claustrophobic it gets. Like, industrialization creeps in, and there are more trains, there are more cobbled streets, and I love the way it makes you feel like the world is closing in on you, despite the fact that you come into this massive city compared to like Armadillo or Strawberry or anything.
The first time you ride into Saint Denis, I didn't even know Saint Denis was in the game. I didn't think there'd be a giant city. Apparently other people had already traveled there, but I didn't actually know that it existed until the mission where you ride in with Dutch. And that particularly stood out to me, was like, yeah, we are definitely far from where we're supposed to be. You're in these tight city streets. It's got like a green, ugly tint to it. And it's gorgeous, but as you're riding through, you can just tell, like, I'm not supposed to be here. And everything you do there just kind of spirals and spirals and spirals.
The fact that you don't have as much room to maneuver makes sense. I think Arthur is supposed to feel that, and I think you are too.
Just walking through that city, like because I also didn't travel there before I was supposed to, and getting there in that first, like, it's like a half cut scene. It's not like a full like thing. You walk up with Dutch and it's huge, but then you know the further east you get, or like as the game progresses, and you're getting to to Saint Denis in particular, like you really feel the difference between the different regions of the game. Like that feels like Deep South, and where you came from feels like the Midwesty Great Plains area, and it feels so different from the first game where you're like so clearly in like a Texas area. And I think they did a really good job of developing the different regions, so you also feel those transitions just anywhere you go around you as you're exploring a certain area in your camp or whatever it is. And I thought that was really well done, and how much they were able to pack into. I mean, it's a huge map, but they like really were able to make each area feel distinct.
And then we just had the Game Awards the other night, and probably my favorite musical performance was the Red Dead medley.
Yeah.
Daniel Lanois was on stage, and he was like heavily involved with the score and soundtrack of this game. But I think like the first thing any of us noticed in the previews was, holy shit, the music's good. Whether it's the soundtrack or the score itself. Like there are a couple moments in the game that are very much like that, entering Mexico in the first game. Like I described Red Dead 2 as like a game built on moments, like plural moments like that, where other people will experience it, but the fact that like it makes it feel so personal to you is pretty impressive. What are some of your favorite parts in the game with the music-wise? I don't know if you could say it without spoiling.
Having on my second playthrough, hearing the difference between the music if you're a dishonorable or honorable is really neat. You definitely can tell by listening to it, like, all right, this is definitely meant for a dishonorable Arthur. But I think the part that stands out for me in terms of music is when you, I don't want to spoil anything, but just May I Stand Unshaken. I think like whenever that song is used, which I believe is twice, it works so well. It feels like
in two very different situations.
Two very different situations. Like at first when I heard it, I was like, oh, they're trying to recapture the moment you go to Mexico. And then when you hear it that second time, I'm like, oh, okay, this worked very well. I think I like the choice of music almost more than when you first enter Mexico.
There's so many times in the game you realize that they were setting this moment up like 25 hours ago.
Yeah,
While
that builds
tough,
into that slow pacing.
And it's tough to like recommend, like it's funny, like it is the game this year I would tell everybody to try.
Yes.
I don't blame people if they get frustrated and don't want to play it, but for me that's what makes it more special because it is Rockstar, one of the most lucrative, if not the most lucrative AAA developer ever. And they are making this, like we've mentioned it several times during arguments, but like I think it was Rami Ismail on Twitter said it's the most expensive indie game ever made. And that's actually like, it's funny, it's obviously like, it's an oxymoron, but it's kind of true, right? Like it sets up so many things for like 20 hours later, but you get through so much frustration, but if you're patient and you kind of accept it, it might not be frustrating, it might just be more methodical.
Yeah, like I think the frustration comes in if you were expecting one thing, and then you got Red Dead Redemption 2. Like I said earlier, I think open world game is a little disingenuous because I think you go into it being like, I'm gonna be a cowboy, baby. Like I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do stuff, and I'm gonna be an outlaw, or however I want to play this game, and that's not what you're getting. And then I don't think that is better or worse. It's just like, I think some of that frustration can come in if you're like, I just want to get to the point where I get to shoot a bunch of guys. Well, you're gonna have to wait a little bit. And I think for me, like that worked really well. But I would want everyone to try it with an open mind. It's not like it's not like a cowboy playground. It's not like you're gonna go in and have the freedom to do what you want.
Especially coming from GTA 5, like it took them 5 years to make this. Rockstar has not released a game since GTA 5, and that game was very much a playground. You know, like it had a story, and it was a good story, but it was designed for you to just kind of mess around, blow things up, like go on killing sprees, whatever. And this is much riskier, much more restrained and paced.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, to me, it's when people think cowboy fantasy before the game out, they're like, before the game release, they're like, all right, robbing trains, holding up saloons, just like galloping through the Wild West. This game is about the cowboy fantasy, but also the slow, boring moments, like just sitting by the fire at night eating baked beans.
Or riding on your horse for what seems like forever.
Yeah.
Whether in cinematic mode or not.
Yeah.
But also, like the last major thing I want to touch on is the fact that it's a prequel to something we've already played, obviously. And that is a huge deal. Again, we don't have to spoil anything, but Callie, you had mentioned in your review, and like whether you even played the first game or not, I think the fact that it can lead up to, you meet certain characters and you already know some of their fates, whether like we don't have to point out specific characters, but the fact that it can set up the first game, which was from 8 years ago, and still be just as impactful is pretty powerful. Because Lucy, I remember you were doing that story recap.
Yeah.
So you came off the first game pretty fresh, and Callie, you just like replayed it for the first time like right before Red Dead 2 came out. So like I think that's pretty important because going into Red Dead 2, you know a lot of what's going to happen, but how they get there is pretty powerful.
So like the first Red Dead Redemption is one of my favorite games of all time, and so I was approaching the prequel, sequel, companion piece, whatever you want to call it, with a lot of trepidation really, because not only did I really enjoy that game at the time, like that was 8 years ago, and I've had 8 years of just having such fond memories of it, and just basically my love for it growing even more because, you know, you get the rose tinted glasses and everything. So I was kind of worried with what they would do. And obviously I think the biggest change is not only just having John there, because you feel like you know John so well by the end of Red Dead Redemption, and to have him in such a different light through the eyes of other people, that was such a clever link between the two games, I feel. And also the fact that you did know the fates of a lot of the characters, and you would know what would happen in the way that you had all these emotional moments that were actually kind of subtle. Like, I don't think I would have kind of realized half of them if I hadn't been so deep in the first game as recently as I have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you can play this game without having played the first game, because I think
100%.
like Arthur stands on his own as a character. There's a lot of development of the gang, but there's an incredible amount of tension in knowing what happens. And I think this is something people thought I was being spoilery in my review, but I was just saying, you know what happens at the end of Red Dead Redemption 1. If you know what happens then, it takes on an entirely new meaning, some of these events. And there's things that would be heartwarming that are bittersweet. And there are things that I think would have been more upsetting if I had known, like I don't want to give the specific example I'm thinking of, but you probably know what I'm talking about. But there's one character where it's like they could have died, but I was like, well, I know they don't die. So that mission took on a different, like, I was like more chill about it. I was like, I get to appreciate the little moments of this mission because I know there's no rush because I know this person lives. So like, I think that it just allowed me to see things in a way that, just appreciate things that can take on a double meaning in this game. But I was also so attached to John after playing the first game so soon before I got Red Dead 2 that at first I was a little like, who's this Arthur guy? But then I really like came around on Arthur, and I love him for who he is on his own as a character.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big concern of mine, was that I loved John Marston so much. His voice became iconic, and he wasn't in anything else. He was just in Red Dead Redemption and just went quiet until this game came out. And I was pretty bummed initially that we'd be playing as someone else, and I did not think I'd like... I mean, I figured I'd grow to like Arthur Morgan, but I did not think I'd like him nearly as much as I like John, but somehow he surpassed that, and I think that, you know, once again, shows how sharp their writing is.
Yeah. And I mean, John had like his own arc in how his character changed in Red Dead Redemption 1, but now I appreciate him even more as a character because you see how he changed from when you see him at the beginning of Red Dead 2. And that's just, you know, that's one character over almost 10 years, and that's just kind of insane.
In the first game, later on, chronologically, he's this badass, like, outlaw. Well, he's not technically, well, he kind of is an outlaw. Obviously, that's a big can of worms, but, like, he's this, like, lone wanderer guy. But then you go back to Red Dead 2, and he's, like, the punching bag of the gang that everybody rips on. And, like, he's like, God, we have to go save John again. And it's so awesome seeing him get from that to the person that you see at the end of Red Dead 1. And it was pretty powerful. And I don't know that they could have done that if it was just, well, they definitely could have done that if it was just a sequel. I think it's more impressive in some ways that they pulled that off with a prequel.
Never thought I'd say this, but good to see you, Arthur Morgan.
All in all, like we said, Red Dead Redemption 2 is the game that we would tell people 10 years from now, 2018, it was Red Dead Redemption 2. That's the one that you needed to have experienced. It might not have been the most enjoyable game throughout, but I know a few of us had mentioned this during arguments. The peaks were like higher than any other game's peaks, despite the fact that it had a lot of valleys. Like other games could have been like semi-high during the whole thing, but
yeah, I mean, it wasn't torture to play. Like, right, I don't think it's like, I was like, oh, I can't believe I'm playing this game. And then at the end, I was like, I'm glad I did that. You know, like, I just think like there's some things that seemed to be pain points for more people. Like, I think it was a more divisive game than some other games. But like, I don't want anyone to think it's like a huge slog or anything. I think it's just slow and takes patience.
Yeah, and I feel like it resonated with me more than maybe any other game that I played this year because of you had to put more of an investment of your time and yourself into it, and I feel like that was the give and take, I guess.
Especially waiting 8 years, I was more than ready to kind of put that. I was perfectly fine with a game that took its time and kind of doled out the story very slowly.
Even if we had to play it really fast for work.
Still had to play it really fast, but still like 50 hours long.
Yeah.
I got to take my time.
Yeah.
That's nice for you.
Yeah. It was very nice. But anyway, if you want to catch up on the rest of our top 10 games, this is the only one we gave a literal ranking to. This is our number 1. But there are 9 other games this year that we have just in a general top 10, including God of War, which we mentioned, including several other games. Go check that out on GameSpot. We'll be talking about those throughout the coming weeks, and in some cases, probably throughout the coming years, like we read that too. We'll see you then. We'll see you around. Stay tuned.
There always seems to be more and more civilization. I want to get back in the open country of the West, or what's left of it, but well, even that ain't the way I remember it.